Hello, hello. Megan Thompson here with Megan Thompson Coaching. And I wanted to speak today regarding the concept of what is holding your child back if you find that she's or he's struggling significantly in the school setting during virtual or hybrid or in-person schooling right now, especially in the middle of a pandemic. So we know that there's a big difference between general frustration with how schooling is happening and the word struggle, like intense meltdowns, daily frustrations, outbursts, eloping, choosing not to show up, slamming the computer down, turning off the Zoom call, not doing homework consistently and thoroughly on a daily basis where it feels like a battle over and over and over again. This is what I'm talking about compared to griping and missing your friends, right? We all miss our friends right now. Those of us who are in isolation or have minimal contact or no contact with our social network aside from on the internet or through some other technological experience. And the as the weather gets colder, isolation can grow. And so knowing, rounding out about 9 months of this process where the majority of states have been in some sort of lockdown, it's what I want to do is speak about how some highly sensitive children are struggling even more in this setting and what we've noticed for children who have been able to make the most out of virtual schooling, particularly. I want to speak about that today. So one thing that I want to acknowledge, and I've said this before, especially, as the pandemic hit and moving into kind of surviving and then moving into being able to thrive in this pandemic circumstance. One of the things that I've been speaking about here is the necessity of focusing on helping your child be emotionally available for learning. So today, what I want to discuss is the understanding that your child who's highly sensitive has a different way of seeing the world, has a different way of experiencing the world. And what that means is that their brains are wired differently. So when their brains are wired differently, that means that they experience more information, data coming in from the world. They process that more deeply as well. And they also spend more time sifting through the emotions around that. So they feel deeply, much more deeply than non-highly sensitive people. And so while they're taking in more information from the world, it's also true that information that they're taking in can impede them from staying focused in the classroom. So I have a different training on the difference between anxiety, ADHD, and highly sensitive children. So we're not going to get into that now. You can post in the comments if you'd like the link to that. I can, myself or my team will be happy to make sure you get it. But what I want to speak about today is helping your child be emotionally available for learning during virtual schooling and noticing the signs that your child's not emotionally available. And what I mean by helping, the focus I want to do is help you assess whether your child is actually emotionally available for learning in that setting. So right now, what I know is that if your child is being schooled at home, it's likely you are either working at home or you're a stay-at-home parent and you need to help them, or they're in some sort of like after school or daycare sort of setting so that they can be in front of the computer while they're learning, while you're off at work or you're managing the household, etc., or our younger children, whatever. But what I'm focusing on for this is being able to identify the signs that your child is just not able to emotionally stay focused. So in terms of virtual schooling, obviously the screens in and of themselves are creating a barrier for staying present in the classroom because they're not actually present in the classroom. But there can also be a lot of struggle in terms of staying connected to the teacher's teaching. That you'll need to assess for your child and whether or not a modified assignment would be more appropriate, or an assignment in advance, receiving that assignment in advance could be more appropriate for your child. Because when your child is learning in a new setting, and we know that for some of you, virtual to hybrid, from hybrid back to virtual has been a bit of a pattern, especially this fall for different states and different counties and states. And so what that means is that it may very well be that your child is struggling to get used to different things and routines, because it's difficult for the routine to be reliable. And highly sensitive people need reliability and consistency in order to feel safe and like that they can thrive. And so I would encourage you to look at how certain parts of their routine can stay reliable, even if it's not in the same work setting. That might mean that you need to increase reliability and consistency outside of the school setting to make this happen. And then the next thing that I want to focus on is noticing that your child may be paying attention to the screen, in the sense of looking at what's going on, but they might not be actually absorbing the material. So overwhelmed and overstimulated children cannot demonstrate their skill set effectively. That skill set is true for academic success. It's also true for empathy. You can watch my videos on that. Because we know highly sensitive children are skilled in experiencing empathy. It's part of the trait. But if they're emotionally reactive, then that can consume the empathy expression for children who are highly sensitive. So that's an important note to take in parenting a highly sensitive child, because without the ability to help your child mitigate their emotional reactivity, they can pretty strongly react on a daily basis. We know through meltdowns, aggressive behavior, refusals to follow through on expectations, difficulty in communicating what their needs are. And that can happen on a daily, multiple times a day basis. So when we see parents who are able to help their kids not only get into the school setting, but stay there and learn, there are a couple things that are indicative of a child who's not emotionally available for learning. Now, I want to speak more in particular to the worried, anxious, highly sensitive child for this part of the conversation, because the children with explosive behaviors, intense meltdowns that are aggressive in nature, physically intense, that is a different presentation, and I speak about that often. So what I want to speak about today are the children who, what I like to call, they tend to turtle up. They will go into their little shell and they will stay there. And that shell is hard, and you could feel like as a parent, you are just like, knock, 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 hello, anybody in there? And they're looking at you doe-eyed from inside that turtle shell like, do not pull me out of here. And that's like, that can often feel like the worst of it pre-meltdown. Or for some children, that's as much as you're getting, but they are just shut down for several hours, and you can't get a word in edgewise because they're not emotionally available for learning from you. And that's really what we're talking about here. It's not just about learning in the classroom. They first need to be able to be emotionally available for learning from you. Now, highly sensitive children change their behavior when their parents change how they interact with them. So this is research that was started in the 90s regarding particularly the highly sensitive trait and matching that to behavior change in children. But it began in the 60s regarding highly sensitive people and how to help them build skills. Just in a different, but without the label of highly sensitive person, HSP, or sensory processing sensitivity, which is what they call it in the research, what Elaine Aron dubbed it in the research. So Elaine Aron is not the first person to study sensitive people. She's just the person who named it. So 30 years prior to that, Marsha Linehan studied highly sensitive people and people who were born more sensitive, as did several other psychology experts. But Marsha Linehan's one of the ones that is a higher proponent. She studied it in the mental health field compared to the personality field that, while Dr. Aron does have a psychology degree, she studied it from the angle of understanding sensitive people in general rather than sensitive people with mental illness. And Dr. Linehan in the 60s started studying it from sensitive people who have mental illness. So in terms of my training and what I know to be true is that when you think about preventing mental illness for highly sensitive people, you need to prevent and systematically build skills that allow your child to stop avoiding their emotions, to stop reacting to their emotions and then avoiding them. And so when you think about a child who turtles up or who can stay frozen in a certain circumstance, we need to help them not just break out of their shell by breaking out of it, right? The cliche in that respect, but in noticing that it's safe to come out and to stay out. So I want to speak about this and actually share a couple of images of families who have celebrated this. Because I'm doing a little bit of theme for you guys with that, because it is so important to understand that a completely different life can be true for your family, even in a pandemic. Because you need hope. You need hope. And with that being said, I always say hope is not a strategy. Hope gets you in line to follow the strategy, like in line to go find one. And not in line like, aye, matey, or yes, ma'am, in line. But hope sparks the search for a strategy is probably a more eloquent way of saying that. So I want to speak about this family. Is parent of an 11-year-old, and when we first got started it was probably May, end of May, maybe beginning of April. Maybe end of April, sometime in the spring. She was celebrating here in September. So again, we haven't captured wins recently from our Facebook groups, but these are the ones that my executive assistant put in my inbox a while ago. And so what she's speaking about is the first week of school. And the first week of school for a middle school student who would have her meltdowns look different. Her meltdowns were frozen tears of what if this is wrong and this is wrong and this won't work and this won't work, and if I can't find this, what'll I do, and I don't think I can make it, and will you help me? And mom, who is an outcome driven self-proclaimed problem solver, and that served her very well in her career and in her life successes. It wasn't helping her oldest preteen learn. Because when she would tell her sensitive child what to do, well then, Mom, what if, I don't know, I'll come up with an example. What if I'm cold? Like, should I bring a sweater today? What if I'm cold in school? Well, keep it in your backpack. You can pull it out if you're cold, right? Like that's the problem solver in us. That's like, it's pretty clear, obvious potential here. But one thing that she wasn't noticing was that her child wasn't actually emotionally available to learn that flexibility of like, you can bring the sweater and you can keep it in your backpack and you can use it or you cannot. Because in that moment, she was overwhelmed with anxiety. She was overwhelmed with frustration of not having an answer to her problem and not being certain that her answer would be right, and wanting to do it right the first time, being sensitive. So it was very difficult for this parent and her daughter to see eye to eye because they didn't. She often didn't really know how to speak the language of a child who struggled with making decisions because she was such a decisive parent. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that you can be highly sensitive and decisive. And teaching your child to do the same, because this mom was actually identified herself as a highly sensitive person after we started working together and she started to understand more about the trait. She started to glean that and identify with the trait much more effectively. And it helped her see that highly sensitive people, I was going to say come in all shapes and sizes, but that's like, I mean, I guess you could say that. But what I mean by that in terms of the sensitivity and the spectrum, the spectrum of the personality can come in all shapes and sizes as well. So anyways, what we're noticing here is that this is a child who couldn't decide. And I use the example of a sweater that isn't particularly an actual example from that child because, we're blurring out the names and it's important for us to maintain confidentiality for the kids that we work with. So this is a child who a situation like picking a sweater would have paralyzed her for a solid half an hour. And then her mother would have been really frustrated with her and yelled at her to get in the car. And then just told her, like, bring it or not, I don't care. And obviously that's not the parent that she wanted to be. And it's not the parent that her daughter needed her to be either. And so that's why she booked a call and we spoke about solving the problem. And she decided that she needed help. And because if she wasn't able to be decisive in that matter, then how could she help her child learn to be decisive? And what we're seeing here is that her child was able to decide that it was going to be okay, even though school was late, even though the pickup procedure was changed, even though she had to carry all her stuff, even though she was needing to go to 7 different classes, right? And in all of that, she felt relaxed enough. Remember, a turtled up, highly sensitive child, if any of you have those in your mix of family dynamic, even that, she was able to make a new friend. So how relaxed do you need to be in order to make a new friend, right? You need to be able to not just notice that somebody else is seemingly friendly, but also trust your gut that that seemingly friendly person wants to be friends with you. Reach out beyond your gut, say hello, either hello back or initiate the conversation, and then maintain that conversation enough to make it a meaningful thing you would tell your parent about as a preteen. This mom was obviously just over the moon about her daughter's first day of school this year. And they're continuing to see that success perpetuate because the strategies we teach her are not just focused on knowing what to do in the moment, but also staying emotionally available for learning, being able to perpetuate the availability to learn about the fact that new things might happen, but it doesn't mean that they're bad. Different things might happen, but it doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means that they're different. And that's okay. Different things can lead to great changes that can be insurmountable in your family's happiness. So what we did was we helped her notice how to speak her child's language because it was not her language. We helped her acknowledge her child's strengths. We helped her not just do that from a place of being her kid's cheerleader and pumping her up every day so she could go out and do it on her own. But helping her set limits clearly for her own priorities and time so that her child could start to own what she was available to own. And then in a way that paced her child in feeling capable, rather than just saying, you know what, you're a preteen, you can absolutely deal with this. Like, this is just absolutely something you know how to do. You should know how to do this by now, which is what she was doing before we started to work together. And now her child is independently taking ownership of what she needs her to do. So we're celebrating this preteen, but what I also want to do is notice another family of a younger child. And actually, it looks like I didn't upload it, so give me a second. Okay. So this is a parent of a 4-year-old, and they actually were terrified of sending him to preschool when they got started with us in July. And they weren't sure like how virtual preschool was going to work, or if that was even a thing or whatever. And with that being said, because he had such severe separation anxiety, and they had twin siblings, younger twin siblings, they knew that they needed him to go into to preschool in order to not be significantly emotionally delayed the next year. They had already delayed the process as long as they could without getting professional support. Over the last year, they chose not to put him in like a daycare setting or anything. With the twins, the twins were 2, this child was 4, their decision was because they didn't think that he was going to be able to feel capable of leaving one of the parents' side, I should say, enough to go to another setting. But they knew, because he's got twin siblings, that he also needed a break. He also needed a break that was different, so that he could be around same age peers and develop in that way. But it was challenging, just with the twins being 2, to make arrangements for that socially on a one-on-one basis. And so they wanted it to be more structured. So they really, really, really wanted to help him go to preschool and do that effectively. So this is a child who struggled significantly in any setting, to include family settings, extended family settings, with loud noises. And he said that and he was so overwhelmed that he would refuse, and all situations would end up in tears. So I want to speak to that, because the process that this family experienced was not just in helping their son unturtle, but it was also in helping mom notice how to help her son understand that he could handle it. And that's a big difference. There's a big difference between, kind of peeking your eyes out and exploring new things, and feeling confident that even without mom at 4, you can handle it, even without your parent. And so for these moms, it was really important for their son that their son felt like they both understood that he was able to reach out to them for help, and he could handle it. And so they worked really significantly on being able to communicate with him what his needs were, and how to pace him into being more social. So much so that He was able to speak into the camera, have a conversation, participate on his second day of preschool. Whereas in prior examples of any social interaction, virtual or not, he would be in the corner, wanting to leave, and be physically unsafe, where mom had to grab him, because the twins were, not attached at her side either. And, hands over ears, and just completely not able to follow through. And so this is from July to first week of school in California. So I'm just naming the state because I think in California they start in August, but I could be wrong. It could be early September. I can't remember if it was pre or post Labor Day. So you can read. I'm not going to read it to you. You can pause, or you can take some time and read it. But basically what we're doing is noticing that for your family at a young age, or even preteen, the focus needs to be first and foremost not on getting the work done in school, or even just keeping track of what the work is, but being able to feel emotionally in control. And when your child is emotionally in control, then they can meet age-appropriate expectations for academics. So otherwise, you're just focused on getting it over with and teaching them to rip the Band-Aid off of their emotions and show up and suck it up. And that doesn't work. It doesn't work because it actually perpetuates the perspective that their behavior is a choice rather than a symptom of overwhelm and intensity. And for highly sensitive children who don't yet have skills, when you send the message to them that their intense emotions are a choice, they actually feel significantly invalidated and misunderstood. And invalidating environment is one of the number one key factors in chronic suicidality and self-harm for highly sensitive teens. So this is a pretty serious rabbit hole that you're traveling down if you're not focused on helping your child manage it early. So when we think about noticing that your child needs to be able to communicate their emotions safely to you at an early age, if they can't do that later on, they hold it in together, they hold it all in, and then without coping skills, they take it out on themselves or others. So it's a pretty logical sequence of events, but it's also research-based and science focused in terms of the statistics, which I've demonstrated in other videos. So and trainings for you, so that you have clear information in order to make an educated decision on when too much is too much. So again, if your child is turtling up or staying frozen, that is a symptom of fight or flight. Freeze is actually at the heightened level of the intensity and is a pretty significant indicator of helplessness for your child, shutdown and helplessness. And so when you think about what's happening in that moment, your child is in some pretty severe state of overwhelm. And that is necessary for you to address first before you can maintain and sustain expectations that they'll get their schoolwork done. So regarding being able to tackle this, the first and foremost focus is in helping your child notice their deep emotions, dissipate them in a way that helps them feel like they're in control rather than just turning them off, because that's not a thing, and being able to feel curious for learning, and curiosity breeds a yearning for learning. And when we think about the way that the educational system is working in the United States, and even in the developing world, you need to be able to have a curiosity of how things work and how to break things apart and how to put them back together in order to survive in the career field that your child might be interested in, because of how technology is taking over the basic cause and effect work that that is just not going to be available in the next 15, 25, 35 years, because robots will be doing it. And I say that tongue in cheek, but it's true. You know, when we think about some of the jobs that the children, you know, turn teenagers, turn young adults who, without skills, might have been able to pick up a position, that, you know, in order to kind of fumble around in early adulthood while they figured out how to manage their emotions, so much so that they can creatively solve problems and eventually learn how to sift out of overwhelm. Many of those positions are going to be are going to be substituted with technology. And, you know, I joke about this. It's not that we're all going to be, you know, visited by moving Roombas in our house. But what I mean by that is there are some jobs that are not going to be available for your child because the computers will be utilized in different ways in the next several decades. And so your child's going to need to be able to curiously figure out what they're learning and apply it in multiple different categories, rather than just being able to rotely memorize and spit back out. And so having your child just show up to digest the information and spit it back out for, you know, testing purposes or whatever. This is not a soapbox on the public school system. I'm just talking about, we all know what's going on right now. In a lot of the public schools, in terms of how their, you know, how academic success is judged, and how teachers are being required to teach to tests right now, specifically in the education system, in the public education system. And so highly sensitive children who can see the big picture and then also see the small picture, because they can look at very small details. They have a skill set that can be honed to creatively solve problems and, you know, be engineers, doctors, therapists, artists, creatives of the world, if they can curiously look at situations and kind of inspect them from different angles before they start to put the puzzle pieces together of a problem. And that skill of fostering curiosity and learning requires emotional availability. You need to be emotionally available for that, because if you're overwhelmed, right? Like think of a day that you had something on your mind and you were worried about somebody or something. You're distracted. You're just not fully entirely present in order to use your whole brain's capacity to solve a problem. So, you know, thinking about building that skill set in the academic setting for children, in order for them to use it in their careers growing up, you know, in early adulthood and then in adulthood and beyond, in the career world, your child needs to be able to see a problem, look at it from multiple different angles, and then figure out what's going to be the best course of action rather than like the most well-traveled course of action. And because the most well-traveled course of action, where it's like very simple, you know, if this, then that, humans are going to teach robots how to do a lot of that stuff. So, or computers or whatever, you know, what is it? Amazon's like already got some prototypes of grocery stores that don't require, what's the word? I mean, not just cashiers, but also like employees, because it's like vending machine run or whatever. I don't know. I read about it in a magazine. I'm not trying to get into the nitty gritty of that. I'm trying to use it as an example of how, we've just seen various large companies systematically eliminate human labor. And so the people who are designing those systems are going to need to be able to pick things apart and put them back together to make them work, right? So you're thinking logistically, big picture, and then small picture. I mean, we can just roll with Amazon as an example, right? Like thinking about that company and who helps build those kinds of systems. It is a very complicated system to know that somebody in this area can buy a thing and it can show up in 2 days. And like knowing what inventory needs to be kept, knowing what sort of, variety of inventory needs to be kept, not too much, not too little. Knowing, where in the country more needs to be kept, knowing, how much of, how many drivers need to be around, right? Like there's just, it makes my brain explode in terms of the logistics. This is why I have a team. It's not my wheelhouse. Christina's my wheelhouse for that. She's my spreadsheet queen. So that kind of stuff is requires like people who are able to think big and then think narrow. So when you think about being able to be systematic in solving problems, you need your child to notice the big thing is big. Okay, right? Like this is a big problem. It's big. And then how do I narrow it down to solve each piece of it rather than staying overwhelmed? Like, oh my gosh, this project is so big. I'm going to procrastinate, never deal with it, and then cram and try and fix it tomorrow. But then be so, perfectionistic that they're worried that they're going to get a bad grade because they waited to the last minute, that they then either don't do it or they explode, or they turn in what they think is a B product, but they pulled an all-nighter, and in their mind, what is a B is in the teacher's mind still an A. But like you're worried that your kid is just going to be a walking heart attack when they're 40 because of that level of stress and pressure that they put on themselves. So obviously we want children to be able to manage their stress a lot earlier and stop that cycle so that they can cut themselves some slack, look at big picture projects, and then systematically slow themselves down to take your guidance to do it piece by piece rather than waiting to the last minute, right? So I bring that scenario up because it is also often a similar circumstance with children who turtle up. We see that avoidance of the task until the very last minute. Procrastination can go hand in hand in that respect. Okay, so if you need help in dealing with that, looking at the big picture and making it granular, something that we do for highly sensitive children. That is one of the things we do for parents of highly sensitive children, so that we help parents eliminate those meltdowns, eliminate that self-isolation, and on a daily basis, so that you go back to living and you can deal with it in a way that is much smaller, much more typical for child development, and feels so much more manageable as a result for both you and your child. And if you need help, go ahead and head over to meganthompsoncoaching.com/talk. Let's go ahead and get that link up there. And book a call. Make sure that you show up ready to take a clear look at where you're struggling, where your child is stuck, where you want to not only help your child be, but also where you want to be as a parent. And then if we can help you, we'll tell you how that works. If I feel like, or my team feels like something else is going to be more efficient or effective, rather than working with us, then we'll steer you in that direction. Okay. Because, what's more important to us is that you have a plan that's going to actually be effective. not only is efficiency, but results are high values of mine. So that's crucial that we make sure that everybody that we work with or speak to and think is going to be a good fit is actually a good fit for what we do. So we don't know that until we talk to you, because we want to be that certain that we can help. So that's that. Go ahead. That link, we'll post it below the video as well. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.